The Monster Fish, written by Colin Teal and illustrated by Craig Smith. Chapter 1. Ben lived by the sea, and he loved fishing and often went out into the boat with his mum and dad. Once a year, the big boomer fishing contest was held. There was a prize for the person who caught the biggest fish on a hand line. Ben was checking his fishing tackle for the contest when the phone rang. His mum answered it. Your cousin Andy's on his way, she told Ben. He wants to come fishing with us. Ben's dad rolled his eyes. That boy's as clumsy as a puppy, he said. He's sure to fall out of the boat. He'll be okay, Mum said. He'll catch something. Dad snorted. Pfft. The only thing he'll catch is a cold. Chapter 2. The boat ramp was very busy on the day of the contest. A long line of boats waited to get in the water. Andy's gear was a mess. It took him a long time to sort it out. While Ben helped Andy, Mum caught a sea trout and Dad caught a nice whiting. At last, Andy tossed out his line. Careful, Dad warned him. That's where the reef is. You'll snag your line on the rocks. Andy just smiled. He'd already felt a tug on his line. I've caught something, he shouted. Something big. There was a storm of bubbles in the water and a big black shape came up on Andy's line. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't a lump of seaweed. It wasn't an old boot. It was a scuba diver. Andy had hooked her wetsuit. She was not happy. Dad looked at Andy. I think we better move, he said. Chapter 3. They pulled up the anchor and started the engine. Andy stood up and waved goodbye to the scuba diver. Don't stand up in the boat, Dad shouted. You'll fall. Too late. The boat rocked and Andy landed on his back with his legs in the air. Dad shook his head. At least you fell into the boat and not out of it, he said. Chapter 4. The next spot, Ben and his mum caught 3 more fish. Dad caught a big squid. Andy took a line from his fishing box. It was quite heavy, like thin rope. You could catch a whole whale with a line like that, Dad said with a smile. Andy tied one end of the line to the boat, and the other end of the line he put 2 big hot hooks and a huge bait. Then he cast out and waited. Suddenly, the line hummed. I've caught a whopper, yelled Andy. It was a huge snapper, nearly a metre long. They could see its shape at the end of the line. When the snapper was alongside the boat, it gave a flick with its tail and jumped right out of the water. It curved over and landed in the boat, where it flapped about madly. Look at that, shouted Dad. It's a help catch itself. Have you ever seen anything like it? Chapter 5. The snapper was so big that it shook the boat. What a beauty, yelled Ben. What a whopper, cried Andy. It's a monster, Mum agreed. Everyone was laughing with joy. This fish would win the prize for sure. Then the snapper gave another heave with its tail and flung itself out into the air. At the same moment, something shot out of the sea like a rocket. Huge jaws opened beside the boat. The water boiled like an exploding bomb. The boat rocked wildly. Ben cried out. Chapter 6. It was a great white shark, longer than the boat. For a second, Ben looked into its open jaws and saw its rows of terrible sharp teeth. The teeth closed fiercely on the snapper, but as it tried to tear the fish away, the shark was caught on Andy's big hooks. It went wild, it rolled and it plunged. The sea was covered with foam. The shark started to drag the boat forward. Ben and Andy screamed in terror. Cut the line, Dad shouted. If the shark dives, we'll be pulled under. Ben grabbed a knife and tried to slash the line, but he couldn't. The boat was heaving and rocking wildly. Suddenly the shark turned and charged at them. It bit the boat so hard everyone was thrown to one side. Dad was white with fright. Hang on, he yelled. Hang on, don't fall out. Chapter 7. At last the shark tore itself free and shot away. Dad, Mum, Ben and Andy were all left gasping and shaking, lying spread out on the bottom of the boat. Ben was the first to move. He sat up and looked around. Will it come back again, he cried. Mum shook her head. She was very pale. I don't think so. It hated those hooks in its mouth. I think I've had enough fishing for one day, said Dad. Does anyone mind if we go back now? Chapter 8. That was the end of it. They went back to the beach with wet tails. A farmer won the prize for a salmon that only weighed 5 kilos. Ben and Andy couldn't believe it. We caught a snapper 10 times bigger than that, Andy said. How big was it, the farmer asked. Ben and Andy spread out their wings. It was this big. And I guess it jumped into your boat all by itself, said the farmer with a grin. Ben nodded. Yeah, and then it jumped out again, and the shark ate it. Do you expect me to believe that? Laughed the farmer. Mum stepped forward. It was a monster, she said, and a shark did take it. Look, I found these caught in the side of our boat. She held out 2 huge white shark teeth. Wow, said Ben. Mum looked at Dad. You thought Andy would only catch a cold, but he caught a monster fish. Andy sneezed. Well, I think I also caught a cold too.